welcome to episode 46 of Mitolife Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn. Today I'm speaking with Chris King. I actually found this guy through Melissa Hennig. He is Melissa's partner. And if you guys haven't listened to my interview with Melissa Hennig, I highly recommend it. She is the author of Raw Paleo. She has the website Raw Paleo. And she's helped a lot of women with pregnancy questions. I get those messages a lot when women are asking me, which prenatals do you recommend? What about nutrition for the developing fetus? And even after the child's born, what do you recommend that they eat? And Melissa has it down. It's basically, the short answer is animal fats, animal foods, animal protein. So dairy's really good, bee products, which is an animal food, and meat, especially red meat. So there's so much scare about, raw honey for young children and meat for young children, especially not fully cooked. And she kind of breaks through all of those myths. So I highly recommend going back and listening to that episode if you haven't. But Chris is a expert hunter. That is really his forte, and is what we focus on in this interview is hunting. But we also talk about domestication. We talk about water, light, air, heating with wood, a lot of really basic stuff. I just like his laid back philosophy, very practical philosophy. And he even breaks through some myths in this interview. For example, the one that Native Americans used every part of the animal. So he brings up a great counter to that. And as you guys know, I love busting myths here on this show. And so there's a lot even in the hunting realm that people are confused about. So if anything else, this show will be inspiration for you to become more sustainable. You don't have to go off grid and move to the boonies like I did, but just making some small changes, learning how to start a fire with different methods beyond using magnesium or a match, and just doing it from scratch. There's something that happens there, similar to hunting, as I described my first experience hunting in this show, which, is very uneventful, but the feelings that I got were very, very powerful. And I take them with me to this day. And that really inspired me to get back into this lifestyle and doing my best to kind of live off the land as much as practically possible, while still, as Chris mentions in the show, merging the old and the new. So again, not living in a cave, not, moving out of society forever, but living in both worlds at the same time. And that's what I strive to do. So here is Chris King. All right, I'm here with Chris King. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. Ever since I interviewed Melissa Hennig, about animal foods and the importance of animal foods for raising children and just supporting the brain of a human being in general. She brought you up and said that you'd be an awesome guest to have on. And we talked on the phone the other day and had a lot of fun, talked about hunting and the laws around hunting and all these different things. And kind of want to dive into some of that in this show, but can you kind of talk about your background, like how you got into this lifestyle? Because I see Melissa posting on social media pictures of you guys. It's like, rabbit stew, and you guys are just in your little traveling van, and it looks so cool. It's like such a cool lifestyle. You guys seem completely self-sufficient, so it's awesome.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I've always been into the idea of sustainability, right? How, always asking, like, how can we live closer to nature? How can we get our own food? How can we make our own shelter? Really like primitive skills, all that kind of stuff. But I also really love the idea of how do we do that, but also live in the modern world, which I think is something that a lot of people are looking at. It's like we realize that there's a lot of things that are so great about this world, but also kind of a mess, right? So, I'm always trying to figure out how to live in both. I love hunting, I love primitive skills, but at the same time, I love business and entrepreneurship and finance and all that kind of stuff too. So I guess to answer your question, like how I got into all that, I just have been following those passions my whole life, and really been into personal development my whole life. I remember when I was 12, I started reading How to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and all these like old self-help books, and really realizing, wow, that's my path, that's what I want to do. So I've just been on that trip the whole time and trying to figure out how to make this work.
I love that you said that. It's kind of like merging the old and the new, and that's how I strive to live. And I'm definitely more living a modern life. I guess we all kind of are in a sense.
Sure.
But yeah, I've studied like water quality to like the craziest degree over the last decade, and the always debates over spring water, distilled, RO, and just this whole that's a whole thing in itself. But yeah, just the effect that acid rain has had on our on the water falling from the sky is pretty significant as far as it being contaminated, going through all these smog, fog, kind of crazy little clouds before it comes to Earth. So there's definitely like some things that we need to learn and kind of stay up to date with, I feel. But most people are missing like looking back and, like you said, primitive skills, making a shelter and all that stuff. Like most people don't even want to learn that from what I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, I see there's a lot of people living in what appears to be two camps, right? You have people that, like what you're saying, don't want to learn anything about that. They're completely dependent on the grid, completely dependent on going to the grocery store for their food. The house we're renting here, there's no wood stove or anything, and the fireplace has been turned into one of these gas fireplaces where you just turn on a knob and flames come out. And I thought, well, it's really nice and convenient, but when you think about that logically, it's kind of crazy to have absolutely no sort of self-sustaining heat system coming into your house. And I'm trying to understand like the logic that would set that up. So you've got that whole thing where people are completely disconnected, and then you've got people that are trying to live in the past, right, where they're trying to go sort of back to that world and live completely primitively, and have this romantic sort of notion that we're going to go back to some time in the past where we were living completely connected to nature. And while I love that idea, and I love connecting to nature as much as I can, and living as sustainably as I can, I think that in this world the balance is somewhere in between, and we've got to say, hey, this things are the way they are, and there's some amazing things about that, and there are also some things that we can integrate that are much more sustainable for the earth and whatnot, but finding a balanced approach where we can do both.
I really love that. I completely agree. And I wanted to jump into heating because you brought that up, and I've learned since I moved from Southern California to Idaho in the last month, and there's a nice wood burning fireplace here, and I've had that in my previous cabins, but it's a whole. I think there's a joke or a meme about how wood heats you multiple times when you transport it, when you chop it, and then when you put it on fire. And so it's been a whole workout just moving wood from one side of the house to the other, getting my workout in, splitting wood, and then stacking it. And it's almost like a full-time job. Have you done that before? That whole
Yeah, that's a
Mm.
really great topic. And what you're explaining, I think, is so valuable because you're getting this direct connection to the resource that you're using, that's helping you, that's heating you. And by doing that, by finding the logs and chopping them and bringing it in your house and understanding how wood needs to be seasoned, you can't just go cut a tree down and burn it. A lot of people don't know that. And through that intimate process of connecting to the resource, I just think there's so much value in that. Like you were talking about with you see us with our travel trailer, and it's similar. You've got to bring all the water with you that you use, right? And understanding how much water we actually use is amazing, and how heavy it is, and how hard it is to carry it and move it around, and how fast it goes. Yeah, I think there's just so much value in people taking some time to do that. Even if it isn't living like that all the time, but yeah, going camping, going backpacking, spending an extended period of time in the woods, or like you're saying, heating your house with a wood burning stove for a while instead of the electric heat. It's just so incredibly important to understand those inputs in our life, and what it really takes to use them.
That's really funny you brought up the water because most of our water usage is actually bathing, right? I just bought like a little spout that hooks on the shower, as a shower head replacement, but it's 2 gallons per minute, and it says like made in the USA, and you can find it usually for like $20 at the hardware store, and it's a water saver, but it actually even works in low pressure. And I've noticed that with my water heater, which is fairly small for the size of the house, it actually I actually have hot water for longer just because I have this little thing. So I just thought that was interesting. You brought up realizing how much water we use because it's more than drinking; it's bathing, right? I mean, just one shower, 10 minutes is multiple gallons of water.
Right. Yeah. And just being able to see that and the effects of it and how much you're using, it's amazing. We yeah, water is a big one too. I think that's probably one of the most important resources that people have an intimate understanding with, because most people, they're hooked up to a city water system and they just throw on the faucet and it's just endless supplies of water. It's like, where does it come from? And then it just disappears and it goes somewhere. I don't know. It comes and it goes, and just this sort of never ending supply. And it's just so far from the truth.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's part of why I moved from the desert of SoCal to up north, pretty close to Canada, is because there's really endless water here. It rains a lot. The wells, I have a couple wells here on the property, and they never dry up. And it's just, the snow's melting and coming down from Canada and just refilling everything, and plants are thriving. And so to me, that's true abundance, like more than being a millionaire or a billionaire, having a mansion. It's like, you have water security. To me, you're rich.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think more people need to realize that importance. And yeah, I love what you're saying, how that is the true abundance. It's the food, the water, the air. These are the things that really make life rich and full and are so important. And when people get more connected with that, they connect more to their environment and feel more supported and nourished by it. It's funny what you're saying, like connecting the water to the riches and abundance. I remember one time I got really sick with food poisoning and just terribly dehydrated. I just couldn't keep any water in at all. So if it went in, it came out one end or out the other. There was just no staying in there. And I got so dehydrated and craved water so much that I remember thinking in my mind that if you put a glass of water in front of me that I could drink, because at the time I couldn't even drink it, or $1 million, I'd take the glass of water. And I remember thinking in my mind just so clearly how easy that decision would be. because I was in such desperate need. Um, I was able to recover from that by taking tiny sips and filling myself back up. But yeah, I think it's really valuable to sometimes get in these places of not having enough to really see how important it is.
Yeah, that's a really important topic. I got into health after studying quote unquote conspiracy theories, and that was back in 2005. And I saw the documentary Zeitgeist, which I have different opinions on now, especially the part on religion. But it just it's interesting. There's that show Doomsday Preppers, and just these people that get into this mindset of, okay, I have to stockpile, I have to have rations. You always hear for emergency preparedness, it's like, have your bottles of water, have your cases of water. And it's like,
Yeah.
how fast is the family of four going to blow through those cases of water? 1 week, and then what? It's like that's not a real plan, right? And even those life
Right.
straws, those are popular too. So.
Totally. Yeah. People get it. I know it's so fun. I think people really enjoy the prepping thing because they get to buy stuff. Right. Everywhere it's a consumer culture. Everyone loves buying stuff, and to prep, you got to buy a lot more stuff. You need more gadgets, but yeah, I think on those lines, the most important sort of prep or getting ready for anything is knowledge. Right? Because that you've always got with you. You've always got the skills you learn and the strategies. And talking about water, knowing what water is okay to drink, knowing in your local area where the water is. I think about that a lot. If say the water didn't come out of the faucet one day, most people don't know where they would go just in their local neighborhood to get some water. And these are really important things to think about. And I always think about this too, not from like a disaster standpoint, which is very possible. We all like to think of the zombie apocalypse and a grid completely melting down, and it's possible. It could happen, but it's also could just be a real short-term thing. Like we were just traveling in California, Melissa and I and Jeremiah, and we went to visit some friends, and we took our trailer, and the power company shut the power down voluntarily in large parts of California, and including the Bay Area where we just were. And it wasn't a long-standing disaster, but the power was off for 3 or 4 days. Right? That's real. That kind of stuff happens. And it's really important just to know a little bit about these important resources that we need.
I love it. Yeah, I completely agree. And I like what you said. The most important prepping skill is knowledge. I think that's great. Just to identify different plants. I just harvested chaga for the first time, and I've been trying to find it for years. It's a little bit of a fad thing. I mean, I know it grew up in popularity over the last 5 years or so, but if it's harvested responsibly and not, people don't go crazy, I think it's fine. And got 2 chunks from some birch trees, and even just the birch tree alone, it's like you have the birch bark, you have the chaga, even the sap or the resin from the different trees could be used topically, and that's been kind of a fascination of mine. I interviewed Dr. Cass Ingram, and he created products. I think that he wildcrafted himself of spruce and pine resin, and I take a few drops of that, and I'm just like, wow, like my whole brain just lights up. Whatever, must be terpenes and stuff in there, but it's really cool stuff. I mean, just the I don't think people think about like the bandages, right? And like band-aids, and what if you ran out of band-aids? Like, do you know how to use tree resins, right? Do you know how to make that into
Oh no, you definitely gotta stockpile a lot of band-aids. Really important. Water and band-aids. Right. No, I love what you're saying, and like how does that? I mean, what is that like for you, getting to know that tree more intimately?
feel more at peace. Yeah, it's just like I look outside my window, I'm like, oh, that's a friend now. It's not just a stranger. Yeah, I could recognize it and know what to look for, and I know that there's even more to learn about it. So that's pretty cool. And birch bark actually is a great fire starter too. Going back to fire, I've been learning about, because I did the bow drill method when I first got into
Hmm.
rewilding like years ago, and that took me. I think I counted like 15 tries before I finally made an ember.
And that's pretty good.
Awesome. That's good to know. Yeah, I was really frustrated. I remember, and I just spend like tons of time every day, just devote an hour every day to practicing. And it's a workout. I mean, my arm would literally hurt from doing it. It's crazy.
Right, right. But now you have that skill. You don't have to stockpile 500 Bic lighters,
Or the
right?
little magnesium little things, right? Those are pretty popular that you scrape. I forget what those are
Sure.
called. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are all great, but that skill now is a part of you that you carry with you everywhere, right? So that's another thing that people might have all this stuff stockpiled at their house, but what if something happens and you're traveling or you're just an hour away and you don't have all your stuff? If you've got those skills and that mindset, you're set, and no one can take it away from you.
It's well said. Yeah, and that's really a freeing philosophy. And I think people have trouble getting into that, maybe because most were raised in the modern school system where it's all reliance, right? I mean, I feel like there's a concerted effort to take children away from parents and have them raised by the state. And so there's a whole programming that goes into there, and there's this rebellion against the parents that's natural, but now it's amplified. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's probably why I got into a lot of this stuff. Is I just hated school with every ounce of my body. I think I knew from a really early age that all the time I spent there was just wasted time, and my only regret is I didn't get out sooner.
So you didn't go to college, I take it, or
No, I didn't go to college. I barely graduated high school. I actually didn't have the grade point average to graduate, but they just pushed me through. I think because they knew that I wasn't coming back. I was like, man, if they make me go to summer school, forget it. No way, I'm not doing it. And yeah. So I just rebelled hardcore against the school system, and just I guess you could say entered the school of life and just got started. All my friends, I grew up in Florida. I went to school there, and all my friends went to college, and I just packed my bags and went to Hawaii, and said I'm going windsurfing. So yeah, I just took off and just went with a duffel bag and my windsurf gear and started working at a surf shop, and yeah, just followed my passion and did what I loved, and soon got kind of tired of being a broke surf bum and started a business because I started talking to some people that were pretty successful. And I said, "What do you guys do?" And they said, "Oh, well, you have to start a business. You got to be creative around here because in Hawaii there's no jobs." I was on Maui, which is a small island, so no commerce or I'm sorry, not much industry or anything. So yeah, I just started a little window cleaning business with a friend, and had no education in it, but just read books. I went to, I think it was called the Small Business Administration, but it was a free sort of government service that provided mentors and classes for entrepreneurs. And yeah, just got free help and read books and learned all I could, and just learned by doing and making mistakes and screwing up a lot. But yeah, that's been my education ever since, and I really believe in that, and just doing things and learning from life and the lessons, I guess, that are mined from doing the things you love, that and following your passions and your heart.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I love how you said all that, and I'm in complete agreement. I think I told this to someone recently. I was like, if you want to work for someone, then you could go to school and get a degree. If you plan on working for somebody your whole life, but if you want to have your own business and get creative and you know have some confidence and say I'm going to create something and share it with the world, then you don't need college. I graduated, but I went to a program where it was more free form. It wasn't memorization. I hate that where it's like A, B, C, D or film, whatever. I like just free writing, and that's the school I went to. And I think that's really, if we're going to keep this model, it has to go that way, where it's all like creative writing, kind of choose your adventure for every little project. I think that's the way to do it. But yeah, I loved that you also said learn by screwing up a lot, because I did the same thing. And I had two good friends, David and Will, that just encouraged me when I was just starting my supplement business. And they're like, you can do it, just have confidence, just do it, just jump in. And it took me like a year before I decided to actually do it. And I find that paralysis is really it's just like someone working out, right? They're just like thinking about it most of the time. And then when they actually do it, it was like, oh, it wasn't bad at all. In fact, I'm glad I did it. So,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah, just jumping in and getting your hands dirty is the only way, I think, to really learn things. And I'm a super action sort of based person. So that's my tilt toward the world. Everybody's different. Some people are better at researching and whatnot, but yeah, just super valuable just to do something, even if it's the wrong thing. Nothing's really the wrong thing, because you're learning, you're discovering things about yourself. It's just all part of the journey.
Yeah. Kind of jumping back, this is kind of a tangent. We talked about we're talking about prepping a little bit, and I kind of want to dive more into that.
Sure.
From what I've understand, like I've studied like the history of Russia and Germany, and what we've been taught, and what's actually real, and just the Bolshevik Revolution, all these different things. And it seems like the way that countries are largely destroyed, like Ukraine, for example, was with food shortages. And so, whoever's pulling the strings, starvation is a very effective way to take a country down. And so,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, totally.
so I feel like just having food security, even if it's foraging or learning to hunt wild meat, venison, deer, or whatever in your environment, that's really even more valuable than having a garden, right? And agriculture is good, but I think like the foundation should be foraging and harvesting your wild protein, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I've thought about that as well. And yeah, I love eating things that come from gardens. I love people that garden. I love farmers. I think it's fantastic and wonderful, but I've just never really gone that way. I've never been that good at it, or guess I was never drawn to it because of what you're saying. And that when I'm trying to set up a lifestyle in terms of especially nutrition, I'm looking at what's the most sustainable in terms of nature. So, farming often takes a tremendous amount of inputs. And I should probably not talk about this too much, because I don't know that, I'm not an expert in it, but I just know that in terms of getting my food off the landscape, and if I needed to do more of that, and the studies that I follow to prepare for that, I'm looking at what's out there in nature. So what's growing out there in the world? What can I forage that's already there? Right? What are the animals that are on the land that I can hunt? And I'm just super, super into hunting. I think it's just an incredible pursuit on so many levels. And I look at that from in terms of raising animals too. Like I don't have the big dream of having a ranch with a lot of different domesticated animals, just because it makes more sense for me to put my skills and time into learning how to hunt the animals that are already there, that are living uh, in balance with nature. So I'm always looking at it from that philosophy. If I want to be part of that balance with nature, I want to learn how to get the food that's already there, that I can just sort of integrate, myself and my family into. Does that make sense?
I love it. Yeah, I love futuristic movies. I just saw like both Prometheus movies the last couple of nights. Been getting back into it, but there was Blade Runner 2049 that was remade, and the intro to that movie is there's a worm farmer, and it's kind of the world's destroyed, and it's all dark and stuff, and this guy's just farming worms for his protein. but I don't think we're there yet, right? And until we get there, we still have healthy animals, like you said. Learn to find the food that's already there, how to identify it and utilize it. I really like that, and that's really living in the present. And we could prepare for these, intense scenarios. Maybe all the animals get sick, or it's kind of already happened. I mean, we have Lyme disease, and I was talking to my friend Ben Belty the other day on my podcast here about polyunsaturated fats, and just that getting into the local ecosystem and getting into the meat, and skewing the tissue from saturated to more unsaturated, which is cancer causing, diabetes causing, all that stuff. But it's interesting. But I think the place that we're at currently, we have relatively healthy animals to hunt. No matter what the vegans say about parasites, right? 'Cause it's like everything has worms now, right?
Yeah, well, I always think if I'm concerned at all about it, I just cook it really good.
And I think tobacco
just cook it really well.
I like that. Yeah. There's a lot of anti-parasitics too we have at our disposal too. I know oregano and tobacco are really good ones, but I love that you said hunting is an incredible pursuit on so many levels. I can't wait to learn how to skin a deer. My introduction to hunting was going out in the middle of nowhere with a recurve bow, and I was tracking turkey. I had no idea what I was doing, didn't really research, was just kind of playing with it. And I noticed I got into this really intense mind-altered state. And we talked about this a little bit on the phone the other day, and it was like I had a total shift where I was like, whoa, did I forget that I took something before I went out here? Like, I just felt like super altered. And looking back, it's like I feel like I was connecting with something in my DNA from my ancestors hundreds of years or maybe thousands of years ago that's always been there. And just that skill that I've lost, or that I didn't know was there, which is like tracking. And just I was wearing my 5 fingers, but I was in the snow, and it was, and I didn't get anything, but I still think the experience was worth it, with just that feeling that I got out of it. So that kind of sparked my interest to continue pursuing hunting. And yeah, it was fun.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I like talking about that. Because what you experienced was, I would dare say, more a real part of being a human than 90% of everything we do nowadays. Because you're directly connecting with that part of yourself that's ancient, that goes back so far, like beyond almost anything else that it means to be a human. And I'm sure you and the listeners of this podcast know this idea that, as human beings, we've been around for a long time, right? And just recently, just in the last 10,000 years or so, things have changed a lot with agriculture, and you look at all the new technology, but that stuff is just brand new. Like I think it's a saying that if all of human existence was a year, 365 days, the way we're living today happened like, 10 minutes ago, right? I mean, it's just such a small amount of time. And when we partake in hunting and the pursuit of animals, it forces us into a level of engagement with the natural world that's very ancient, but very much a part of who we are. It's built into our genetics. It's built into our body, into our mind, our vision. When we're looking for animals out in the woods, there's just something that comes alive in us that is just incredibly powerful and incredibly meaningful. People are looking for connection nowadays, and everyone's looking for connection in all these different ways. I mean, I haven't seen a better way to feel more connected to the world than to pursue hunting in that way. I mean, because you have something that's so important that it involves life and death. I mean, that's very real. it makes the experience so real on a level that most people can't even imagine, because based on how it goes, another animal either lives or dies, and there's tremendous responsibility in that, meaning, but also it's such an important part of how we live today anyway. I mean, we all eat things that have died. Even if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, it was a plant that died. And plants might be different than humans, but it's still a living being that gave its life so that we could live. So when you engage in that process in a direct way, I think it matures you as a human. I think there's a level of maturity in taking a life that you can't really get any other way. It makes you more of an adult, so to speak. There's a level of responsibility. Yeah, it's just I could go on about it. There's just so many really, really, really valuable lessons and experiences that come from it. And plus, it's just really fun. I mean, I've been getting kind of heavy there, but I've always been into backpacking. I've always been into nature, primitive skills. I love shooting guns, shooting bows and arrows. You know, um, marksmanship. I love crazy adventures. I love meat. I love nutrition. I love eating really high quality food. And when I discovered hunting, it was like, wow, here's all these things wrapped into one thing. This is amazing. I did this one hunting trip on Kauai where I was hunting wild goats with a bow and arrow, on the Nepali coast. A lot of people might know that part of Kauai, the Kalalau Trail, and I had been there many times just hiking it, and it's a gnarly, grueling hike. Have you ever been to that part of Kauai?
I've been to Kauai, but not that part. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, everybody should check it out. But it's a 13-mile hike through these crazy up and down cliff sides in the jungle, and you get to this awesome beach at the end. And that alone was really difficult. But then when I started hunting it, they throw in shooting an animal, butchering it on the trail, putting it in your backpack, like climbing over another cliff just to get the thing. I mean, it just the level of adventure and excitement and challenge is just unparalleled, in any kind of backpacking or camping trip I'd ever done.
Yes, it sounds like more of a workout too than like Gold's Gym or 24-hour fitness, right? It's kind of you're getting more done. It's not just like playing a video game and having a sense of accomplishment or whatever. It's like you're
Mm-hmm.
you're doing something with that energy that's very useful. Um, I love all of that, and I like what you said going back, even though you said it was heavy. I like that about something died to give its life to support you, and I think I've seen Melissa talk about this a lot, and she I think she used to get a lot of flack, and I do from the plant based community, which is kind of a co opted stupid marketing term now of
Yeah.
the documentary game changers. But
That's right. Yeah, it's a key word.
right, yeah, it's a buzzword. But I come from that world, and I don't. My goal is not to bash or make people feel bad or put people down, but I experienced it, and I've seen deterioration before my eyes, and I've seen people being taken advantage of because their brain isn't working because of their diet. And so I was vegetarian for the first 5 years of my journey, and then vegan for 3 years, mostly raw. And then I discovered like the raws. I started eating bison, eggs, cheese, raw milk, felt better. And I kind of just merged all these guys' philosophies. Like I was listening to all the teachers, all the gurus, whatever, that are big in the health space, speak at conferences, and trying to merge all of it. And I've just kind of basically created my own thing over the last few years that really works for me. But I think really the key for most people is animal products, right? And I'm at the place where I don't think a vegan diet is sustainable on any level, individually, locally, or globally. That everyone needs some animal products. I mean, if we just want to talk about fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, those are so critical. and those aren't found in plants in the right amounts, nor the right forms. So yeah, I think just, especially wild meat too. I mean, that's another level. Like, you want to talk about the difference between grass-fed beef and a bison, right? or elk or venison. It's completely different. I feel like incredible when I eat bison. Like, I've been doing this ground bison blend with heart and liver. Big fan
Nice.
of liver. I think it's almost like a cure-all. Uh, Liver is a food, especially with the context of iron toxicity that everyone has, but that's a rabbit hole. But yeah, big fan of organ meats and wild game. I think that could change people's health. Everyone's always looking for a supplement, right? But maybe that supplement could just be bison.
Right. It can be that simple. Yeah, I remember going through that a little bit too. I was a vegetarian for a few years and started eating meat again and really healthy meat that time around. And I remember being actually full for the first time in years. And it made me realize that the whole time that I was vegetarian, that I was hungry. I never really got that level of satiation. And yeah, I love what you're saying about the wild meat and being a whole different level. As the eating grass fed beef is great. We eat a lot of grass fed beef and really chickens that are raised well, and goats and all these things. It's great. But when you eat an animal that's lived its whole life in the wild, there's a whole different level of nutrition, I think, that comes from that. But even beyond that, I mean, kind of on a sort of esoteric level, it feels to me like you almost take on the qualities of that wild animal in a way. And it makes sense, right? If like it, like heals like, and as above, so below, right? That as within, so without. That's the other part of that. That yeah, if you were going out and pursuing and consuming these wild animals that have these incredible genetics, that are incredibly strong, they have amazing perception, their senses are fully heightened. It seems like, yeah, you would take on those qualities yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And my last conversation with Ben Belty, he has a wild rice company. Really cool guy. He's hung out with Arthur Haynes and that whole crew, and has spent time with some really cool people in the community. And he's a big fan of aspirin, and I think I kind of got him on actually taking aspirin, but not the
Mm-hmm.
bear one, like a better one with less excipients and stuff. But just that compound of it's acetyl salicylic acid, but we could just say salicylic acid, and from the willow bark, right, from the willow tree. And he was making this really interesting point about how that compound in the willow tree used to be a part of our ancestral diet because we were eating all wild game and they were eating the willow tree. But now we have grass fed beef, which doesn't eat willow tree. It's in a little confined little area or whatever. And so we're actually essentially deficient in these aspirin like compounds. I thought that was so cool because that's just, there's so many levels to this that we don't even realize, and we'll probably be discovering for years, what we were
Yeah,
missing.
yeah, I love that, and it's just a small illustration of the greater interconnectedness of everything, and just how complex and how deep that idea goes. And then when you learn of something like that, you're just getting, it's like pulling the window back on just one little piece of it, and it just blows your mind. You're like, oh my God, wow, there's a big thing happening here, and it all wraps together, and it's all perfect in a way.
I love that. And on the topic of wild versus domesticated, the same applies to plants, right? Because when I had my vegan days, I was doing romaine lettuce, or I think red leaf, which is a little better, is a little more bitter. But I would do a whole head of red leaf lettuce with,
Yeah.
sprouted sunflower seeds and all these domesticated plants. I mean, cucumbers, tomatoes, avocado, olive oil, nutritional yeast. The stereotypical vegan meal. And I did that for years, like 4 years, and then when I got into bison and meat, the right kind of meat, I was just cutting up dandelion greens, and I was still buying them from the store because I couldn't find a good source in the wild. but just cut up dandelion greens with my meat in a bowl with some sea salt was so good. And do you guys eat a lot of wild plants like dandelion and different things?
Yeah, we do, and you probably also notice just how strong a dandelion green is compared to a hunk of lettuce, right? It's yeah, that I used to take people out in Sedona on these wilderness sort of excursions, and often would encourage people to sample a little bit of the wild food and the plants and the medicine that grows in the desert. And people are just often overwhelmed by how strong the flavors are, and the bitterness, and just how intense these wild plants can be. And that's because in the wild, the medicine and the nutrients and the vitamins, the minerals, everything is so concentrated when compared to a lot of the domesticated plants, where they've been grown to be large, to be neutral, and to have a more mild, more palatable taste. So when people experience that, it's really just it's revolutionary, and them experiencing what it's really like to have real food. The same thing with meat too. People that are used to eating domestic beef and chicken and whatnot, and then they have a piece of a wild hare, and it's just so flavorful and so intense. A lot of people don't like it because their palates have become, I guess you could say, domesticated in a way. So when you start to sample these foods that grow in the wild and all that nutritional concentration, it's really eye-opening, and it's amazing.
I love that. Yeah, my taste buds. I think we all kind of have different like preferences for taste. Mine is like sweet and salty. I've always been like that. Like I can handle way more salt than most people on my food. I just pour it on.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, something that I guess I never really realized too, or I just thought about this when you were describing the Sedona, the plant walks that you took people on, is wild plants aren't getting watered with hard contaminant rich tap water. They're getting watered with rainwater, which yes still has contaminants in it, but it doesn't have uh, chlorine, chloramine. It's just chlorine plus ammonia, hydrofluorosilicic acid, all these hardcore industrial grade poisons. They're in trace amounts, of course, in the rain getting onto our wild food, but it's not, you know, I mean, I just think of a lettuce that's monocropped, and even organic. Organic and synthetic to me have barely any difference because they both get the synthetic fertilizer NPK. But that poisonous water, it just goes right in, and the plant, it's like a person. If it has to choose between living and dying, it's going to consume some suboptimal nutrition, which we could just say is tap water, just to live. So I just thought that was interesting to say because I don't think people think about, like, especially the vegans or the raw vegans, they don't think about the water that went into their vegetables, which when you eat a vegetable, I mean, that water gets released, right? So what was the quality of that water? The plant doesn't filter at all. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think I like the way you're thinking because it's big picture,
Mhm.
right? You're thinking of everything that goes into the end result, and I think that's really important for everybody to think about, and requires us getting out of sort of a limited viewpoint and thinking about everything that goes into what we eat and everything that goes into what we drink, and like you're saying, the water is that main component, which plants are what, 80% water. I mean, what are we, 70-80% water? And yeah, it's really important to think about those kind of things.
Do you ever see the movie Idiocracy? They just need Gatorade.
Yeah.
Brondo or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I think that's the point we're getting at. People are forgetting like the fundamentals, like you mentioned air earlier, water, soil. It's like we just start there at that foundation. And I'm super into water filtration. I think learning water filtration is as important as learning foraging and hunting now, unfortunately, just with the state of our rain. But I mean, the parts per million of the rain, I just measured it, or the snow actually, melted snow, and I put a TDS meter. It was 11, so that was kind of cool. But I wonder what's in there. So
Yeah.
like measuring it and stuff. But not getting too neurotic, but yeah, something you made me think of earlier uh, when I came to Idaho, the owner of this property, he told me, he said, living here is hard on the body, but easy on the mind. And he
Mm.
said that, that might not sound good, but it's harder to get that nowadays in modern life, where, everyone has depression and anxiety. And, I've had anxiety off and on my whole life. And I've just noticed the more I connect to my environment, and that brings me the most peace, and kind of gives me that inner stillness that I've been looking for my whole life. It's just connecting more, through foraging or hunting, or even just building a fire, from scratch. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
it's
sounds like good medicine, actually, to me. I think a lot of us could do with a little more hard on the body and easy on the mind. I think that's great. It's such a mentally dominated world, and a lot of us, like us, we're knowledge workers, right? Most of our work is done on computers and with our minds, and a little bit of our fingers moving around. But when you have those experiences of doing these real physical things in the physical world, and your mind gets a chance to just relax a little bit, I think it's a really good thing. Everybody should do a little hard labor, like you said, build a fire. Um, yeah, anything we can do to get back in our bodies, I think, is really valuable. It reminds me of when I was younger, and I go out and party all night, and I go to these crazy full moon parties, and it was a big thing. But and the next day, it's kind of dumb, like a little brain dead. But then I thought, that's actually kind of a good thing. It's almost like the mind needs to get a little worked over sometimes so it can take a break.
yeah. I had
Chill
a
out.
That's a good point. I had Adam Bergstrom on 3 times. He's such a fascinating character. He invented like time synced eating, where you eat certain foods at different times of day based on the meridians in the body. But yeah, I think he recommends like staying up, or he's done it, like stay up all night, 1 day a month or something. on
Sure. Yeah.
a full moon, I think, or something like that. And it makes sense. And I like what you said. Anything we could do to get back in our bodies, because I've kind of gave psychedelics some flack just because I see a lot of these biohacking spiritual podcasts just going a really dangerous direction of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And usually, sex and drugs are really closely interconnected because these communities don't promote monogamy like I do. They promote polyamory, and that's like really trending right now. And it's just free love, but combined with magic mushrooms. And I think that's a really dangerous combo because it could steer people down some really dark paths. So I
Sure.
like what you said about getting back in your body, because it's like we need that more than psychedelics. I think psychedelics kind of take us. And as people might argue, what do you mean, Matt? I take psilocybin, I get in my body, but it's like, do you really? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, you can get these altered states just from being out in nature, and a lot of people do, like what you were talking about with your tracking experience with the turkey. Just that immersion in the natural world and getting out of the modern world and the internet and all, the fast paced, all that kind of stuff. It can automatically transport you to sort of a mythic realm, and I find that with hunting all the time, just these sort of otherworldly magical experiences just happen to you on a regular basis because you get out of the programming and everything that keeps the senses dulled. I really like Vision Quest and that type of idea too. Going out and fasting in nature, I think, is extremely powerful and beneficial for people.
I love it. Do you have experience in like old growth forests? Because that's kind of where I am now. And I know we're jumping topics, but I've been obsessed with like medicinal mushrooms, and I have for years because I had friends that have companies that sell the powdered extracts, 10 to 1 reishi, chaga, lion's mane, cordyceps, whatever. Have you done a lot with trees and mushrooms on trees, or?
Not so much. I've dove into the mushroom mycelium world a little bit in the past. I think it's, I had some experience with psychedelic mushrooms, and I think that's really valuable too. But yeah, I think it's an incredible organism to experience and to study and to, like you're talking about, getting to know the birch trees more and appreciating everything that they offer. I think mushrooms and mycelium play this just crucial role in the world just by simple nature of how mycelial network connects a forest, like
I was
literally connects everything in the forest. And I remember reading about how a mycelium will share nutrients from one tree to another that it's more in need. And I think when you consume those mushrooms, all different types, including psychedelic mushrooms, that you get a little glimpse into that level of connection, just because of, like, that's the role that they're playing very strongly in the ecosystem.
I love that. Yeah, I've heard of it as like nature's internet, and I was fortunate. I go to a lot of conferences, and the Natural Health Expo, I saw Paul Stamets speak live, which was really cool. And he was wearing a
Yeah.
hat made of amadou, which is a type of mushroom, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
really wanted to get one. I don't know if that was a marketing thing with what he did, but it worked. And yeah, I got his book, how mushrooms can save the world or whatever. And
Yep.
really fascinating. He was showing all his bins where he grows and cultivates them. I'd like to do some stuff here at my house with cultivating. I guess it's pretty easy if you can find some dead logs and you can inoculate them. You know, um, grow some reishi or something like that. It'd be really fun to do. So
Yeah, I haven't done it that much, but yeah, I think different types are easier than others. You
yeah.
know, sure.
Um, so what kind of species have you hunted? Have you hunted? I would imagine deer or elk or
Yeah, deer, elk, kind of that's what a lot people think of when they think of hunting. It's kind of funny that a lot of times people have a kind of a romanticized view of hunting. I hear this a lot, and I was like this too. That when I first, before I had ever hunted before, and I thought it would be a cool thing. I had this idea that I was gonna make my own bow and make my own arrows and go out there and hunt a deer. And once you get into it, you realize that that's very far from reality, and just in terms of how difficult it is. And I think that's a big eye opener for people when they first start. I talk to people all the time and ask them if they're into hunting, and they say, no, not right now, but if I had to kill a deer, I would, feed my family. And I'm just thinking, man, you have no idea what goes into that, like the level of challenge and understanding.
while they're drinking a beer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. But I think a lot of people have that. So coming back to that, I do a lot of small game hunting as well. So rabbits, squirrels, and the reason I got into that was because at the time when I first started hunting, I was in California in the Bay Area, and there was very little hunting in that actual area, and I didn't have any friends that were into it. I didn't grow up with it. I didn't have anyone in my family who hunted, which is how a lot of people learn. And I just had to get started somewhere. And one of the best ways for people to do that is to hunt small game because it's easier. There's usually a lot more of it around. So you get some proficiency and most importantly, some success fairly quickly, because it can be hard. Like if you jump in and want to hunt a deer with a homemade bow, man, you might be out there for a lot of years before you even get a chance to shoot at one. So that's what I tell people is just get started wherever you can with whatever you can. And the small game is an excellent way to do that.
That's a really, really. I love that because I was looking into like the cabin that I moved from. There were huge squirrels, like the size of my head, like pretty much. And it was funny. My cat would kind of hunt them on the deck, But I thought about shooting them with my bow. I was just afraid it would go past and nail a neighbor or something. But I found a video on YouTube that was cool with. I'm sure you're familiar with Steve Rinella and Meat Eater. I used to
Sure,
show
yeah.
that to my students at juvenile hall, show them that show, and he was interviewing some guy that was a real character. You could tell he lived in the backwoods, but he was like showing how to quickly skin a squirrel, and it's like you
Yeah.
can pull almost like a jacket. You're like pulling it off, right? And it's I
Yeah.
think he did it in like a minute. It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, there's a way you make an incision around the anus area under the tail, and then you stand on the tail and pull by the back feet, and the skin just slides off. Well, if it goes right, you know, when you're first learning, it doesn't always go right. But you were talking about learning how to butcher an animal and all. That's perfect education. So that's what's so cool about butchering and skinning animals is they're all the same. A squirrel has the same insides and sort of muscle groups as a moose, right? All mammals are really similar. So if you can just get started with anything, those skills will apply to everything else. Like when I went and goat hunting in Kauai, uh, I had never butchered an animal that size and never really seen it done by anybody other than on YouTube, of course. How we all learn now. But by skinning a bunch of rabbits, I'm like, oh, well, I can figure this out. It's just a little bigger. So those skills apply. Another thing you can do is go get a domesticated animal in whole form from a rancher. Like, for example, Melissa and I just got a sheep. Found a farmer who had an extra sheep that he wanted to sell, and normally he sold them to a mobile butcher who would come and do his whole thing with the animals there. But I said, no, I want to buy a whole one. He said, well, okay. So we went out to the yard, and he had a rifle, and we shot it, put it in a wheelbarrow, threw it in the back of my truck, and drove it out to the woods and gutted it, brought it home and tied it up, and processed the whole thing at the house. So that's a great way to start too. If you can get your hands on an animal without even having to hunt it, all
Yeah,
those skills apply.
like Roadkill, right? I think I don't know if it was you guys or I've seen people just like if it's fresh and the animal's still warm, like I live in the country and I have a truck that's made for it, so I won't destroy. Like I have the front little guard thing in case this happens, but that would be the easiest way, right? It's just, I mean, it'd be unfortunate, but now that we have roads and all these things, it's really common, right, that a deer just walks out. I've seen it, and I saw it after work when I got off work at Sports Chalet once, and unfortunately, I stayed there with the deer for like 45 minutes until animal control got there, and then she just put a noose around it and then injected it with a lethal injection.
Huh.
Such a waste of life. It was depressing.
Wow.
Even when I was raw vegan at the time, but I knew something about that was wrong. I was like, wow, this animal is just going to be thrown in the trash. How sad, It's like,
Yeah, it's true. I know. I see so much roadkill. We get roadkill every time we can. I always stop and check it out. Uh, but it's hard. You got to be on it somewhat reasonably close to when it died. If it's cold outside, you've got more time. If it's really hot, less time. And you can tell. You go up and check it out, and if it's got rigor mortis, you can see you can look at the eyes, and if they're cloudy, obviously if it smells bad, it's probably bad. You know.
yeah.
But yeah, if you can get to it reasonably soon after it was hit or killed, then absolutely, yeah, roadkill's great. Uh, I think it's it's awesome when you can take advantage of that and salvage it and use the meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what's most intimidating to me is the gutting process. But I guess
Yeah.
once I learn it, it's not that hard. I mean, just cutting some cords and then pulling it out. But is that process, like you mentioned, you took it to the forest, the sheep, is that generally done away from the home? so that the guts don't attract bears and all these creatures to your house?
Yeah, probably a good idea. I always make it a practice of gutting animals out in the field, so out in nature. Um, and the reason that I do that, the biggest one is it just feels right for me to leave that in the ecosystem where other animals can consume it. A lot of people will bring an animal home and gut it and throw it in the trash. And I don't know, it's just never felt right to me. I just really, enjoy the process of leaving that out there for the other critters to get.
I love it. And have you used like the organs? Because I, it's probably domesticated. I buy my liver and I'll buy thyroid capsules. Big fan of taking
Yeah.
thyroid desiccated. And have you taken liver straight from an animal that you killed, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. We usually save the liver, the heart, and the kidneys,
Mhm.
or
Oh,
the brain if you're going to do brain tanning with the hide, which is a process of tanning the hide and making it supple and usable. Um, but you can eat lungs. I've done that before. Uh, I took in one of these wilderness gatherings that I went to. We did an animal processing workshop and used pretty much every single part of the animal for some purpose. We ate a lot of it, which was a bonus of the class. I didn't think about that, but I was like, oh, wait a minute, we're gonna get to eat this whole thing. It was a goat. Um, but yeah, so much of it you can eat, so much of it you can use for different practices. Like we use the intestines, one for making sausage. So we made blood sausage with the intestines and saved the blood from the butchering process. Um, but then part of the intestines we wound up and coiled together and made into a piece of rope. All kinds of stuff like that. I made a knife sheath out of one of the hooves. Used the brain for brain tanning. Just tremendous different uses that you can do. But I think another thing that comes up though is that people sometimes have this notion that you should use every part of the animal, and I don't know. I don't think, not always. There's this idea that that's the right thing to do, is every time you use every part. But if you look at the First Nations people of this continent, Native Americans or Indians, they there's this idea that they used every part, and that's true. They did use every part, but not every time, right? So sometimes you don't have the time to make cordage out of the intestines, or brain tan the hide. And I think that's important, that people don't feel bad if they're not using every part every single time, because I don't think that's natural. It's if you don't take, you should always take all the meat, you should take the organs you can eat. But if you leave the guts out in the forest, that's okay, because other animals get to eat them. It's more of that big picture concept that we're talking about. It's not, if I don't take this animal, it's going to go to waste, right? If I don't take all these parts, they're going to go to waste. No, it doesn't work like that, right? There's all these other species and organisms that are feeding off of that animal as well, and it's okay to leave stuff for them. I guess you could even say if you threw it in the garbage, it would, microbes in the landfill would use it. And well, I don't know, maybe not, but yeah, you can. It's important to look at the big picture.
I really love that you brought that up, because that's something I always heard, in my studies or history class. You use the whole animal. So I'm glad that you busted that myth, and that makes total sense. That you leave something's going to eat it, and so that's super cool. Have you used the bones for bone broth? Like, can you even do that with small game like squirrels and stuff? Or
People do. When I think of bone broth, I usually think of getting that gelatinous material that's in the marrow, right? So yeah, we've made bone broth with deer bones and whatnot, kind of saw them up, just like most people have probably made bone broth with bones they get from the store, and they're kind of cut into sections, and you can see the marrow in there. So you can do that with your own wild game. I have heard of people making squirrel broth with bones. in my mind, I guess I haven't done it because I feel like there's not enough stuff in there, to really make use of it. But yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Have you harvested antler? Because I'm a big, like, I have a friend that has an elk antler company. I've taken multiple grams over the years of it, and I just love its mineral content. Like, I think it has hard to get minerals like copper and selenium that are often deficient. Have you harvested antler and used it?
So are you thinking of like the velvet antler?
Any
Is
of it? Yeah, but yeah, I guess the velvet.
because I
Because there's my friend Ben was saying a lot of it's unusable. I guess, right? You have to look at when it was shed, when the season is, and stuff. Like if you find one in the woods, doesn't mean that there's stuff in there that you could utilize, right?
Yeah, probably. I know, so animals that grow antlers, they go through a phase each year or a cycle where the antlers start out, and I mean, just that idea is pretty incredible that an animal grows this massive rack of antlers every single year, and then it falls off and does it again the next year, even bigger. I mean, talk about wanting to consume an animal that does that type of thing. That's cool. Um, but yeah, so when the antlers first grow, they usually have a velvet stage where the antlers are literally covered in velvet, which is there's a lot of good stuff that's in that. And I've heard that a lot of people, or that's what's most commonly used for that type of food source or supplement, as the velvet from the antlers or the antler tips, which are then tinctured often. Um, I did it once with a roadkill deer I found that had some really fresh antlers. Uh, but a lot of times when you're hunting the deer and elk, the antlers are already past that stage, so they've hardened. And I don't know. I'm not sure if that makes medicine or not. But if you're into bow hunting, usually you can get a deer earlier in the season when they still have those antler or velvet antlers, which would probably be better for making the medicine.
Awesome, I love it. And um, I realized with my story gave you about the turkeys and with the recurve bow, that's really hard. And
Yeah.
now I have a rifle with a scope, an AR-15, and that's really the way to do it. That would probably be an easy entry point, right? To have some type of a scope on a gun, kind of a deal, instead of a bow. That's like a that takes practice, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's such a good topic to talk about too, right? Because yeah, I mean, the bow is so romanticized and all, but it's hard, especially a recurve bow. It is hard to get good at it, and you've got to be so close to an animal to make it work, which is so difficult. And then the actual accuracy is really important because if you shoot the animal in the butt, it's just going to run away and be injured, and you'll never get it, and it'll be hurt, and it's just that's really a heart-wrenching experience, and it's much more common with a bow compared to a rifle. So a lot of people who aren't aware of the reality of these things think that a bow is so much better, but it's really not. Like, it's so much better to start with a rifle because you can get accurate so much faster, and your level of skill can progress very quickly, and so you're able to kill that animal very efficiently and with a much greater chance of actually killing it on the first shot, which I think the ethical nature of things really demands that.
I love it. Yeah, and generally you're aiming for the head or the neck, right? But mainly the head.
Yeah, well, small animals, the headshots are great, like squirrels and rabbits. But a larger animal, you're usually aiming for the vital organs, so the heart and
Mhm.
lungs. So if you're looking at the side of if an animal's turned broadside to you, that area is going to be just behind the front shoulder. So you see that front leg just behind it. You've got the heart and lungs right there, which on a deer is probably about the size of paper plate or so. Not that I'm condoning using paper plates, but Everybody can, imagine that size area.
I'll have to set that up in my Target. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be able to just walk out my front door, and I mean, my neighbors, I hear them firing off every day, and so
Yeah.
it's cool because I wasn't like you. I wasn't raised with this stuff, and I've you know domesticated upbringing, and you know um, didn't get my first gun until like I don't know this year or something, so or late last year, and so it's even just having firearms is there's a level of responsibility there, and as you said earlier, like a maturity that's created from that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I went through that too, getting guns later in life and not growing up with it and having a lot of taboo around it. But like these things weren't around, they were bad, like we weren't supposed to touch them ever. It was this, none of my friends had them. It was this taboo subject. And yeah, just learning about that, getting comfortable going into gun shops, it was really a valuable experience because they do exist in the world. It's a thing that is a very critical part of history and a part of our current world. And I don't know, I just want to be as familiar as I can with everything that's out there. And firearms have been a huge part of that.
And I look at it the same way as like scuba diving. Like I worked at a scuba diving shop for a couple of years and did like 50 dives, mostly at night. And with scuba diving, it's mainly how not to die. That's like the training. Like if you're about to die, do this, and or it's like to prevent mistakes and accidents. And I look at guns the same way. I've even had trained people that were in the military like pointed at me when I was showing them it, and obviously I would double, triple check that it's unloaded. But even if I know guns unloaded, I never pointed at somebody or myself. So I think just getting a couple things down, is like really important with owning a gun. So
Yeah, it's super important. Whether you even choose to own them or shoot them in the future, just to have that understanding of it, and it's not this big gray area that you don't know anything about. I mean, yeah, that's important stuff. I think everybody should do it.
yeah, I fully agree. And yeah, the bow thing, I haven't gotten into crossbows yet, but aiming with the bows, I mean, there's generally no scope, right? I mean, with the recurve, there's no scope, and so I've learned how hard it is. Like every 5 feet increase is like exponential difficulty.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like if you're good at hitting the target at 10 feet, you move out to 20 and you can't even, you're not even hitting on the circle at all, right? It's just like, it's hard. It's hard. And it's great. I think everybody should do it. And, learning to hunt with the bow is awesome because it opens up your range of opportunity. Usually bow season is much longer. A lot of times you can get a bow tag, but you might not be able to get a rifle tag, so you can't hunt with the rifle, but the bow is much more generous in some states. Like that hunt I did on Kauai I told you about, yeah, it was archery only. And that's how I got into it. I was like, I really want to do this hunt, but I got to use a bow, so I better learn how to use it. So yeah, it's good to do, and it just opens up more opportunity for people.
That's a good point. Have you heard of the invasive axis deer in Hawaii? Because I buy a lot of the jerky from there, and I think Joe Rogan did it, and a lot of people go. It's like a big thing, and I guess they're just everywhere there, right?
Yeah, so that's just like the goats I was hunting and the wild boar, the pigs. So Hawaii had absolutely none of these animals before human contact, and still has no predators. So the axis deer were a gift to King Kamehameha from Japan, and like I don't know, 8 axis deer were brought over, and that was it. And of course, they get out and breed, and now there's like thousands and thousands of them with no predators. Same thing with the feral goats. They got wild. There's so much food to eat there. So that's why hunting on Hawaii is an awesome opportunity, because you don't have the same sort of tag regulations that you do in the United States, where we can only hunt a certain number of animals at certain times of the year. You go to Hawaii, and some places on some of these animals, it's just open game. They want you to shoot as many as you can because they they start to wreck the landscape, and they have no checks and balances.
Yeah, this is, I think, another thing that the quote unquote plant based community needs to or should look into is animals overrunning the landscape and kind of getting out of control with their population. Because where I am here, I was speaking at the guy at the gun store, and he was saying that I think it was the moose or the elk, one of the big animals. There's less of them now, and the wolf population went through the roof to the place where wolves are now eating people's dogs, like even on hikes and stuff. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's a big controversial thing, the whole wolf integration. I think they should put some predators over on Hawaii. I think that would make things really interesting. If there are like some jaguars in the jungle and stuff.
Have you ever hunted bear? Because my friend Ben was saying black bear is really good, like especially the fat from like a black bear.
Oh yeah. I haven't hunted black bear, but the fat can be rendered just like tallow or lard. And it really same thing. It's you're getting a wild source of fat, which can be just really, really nutritious and awesome. You got to be careful with bears though, because of trichinosis, which is a disease that pretty much almost all bears have. It's just a staggering percentage of bears carry it. And it's not that big a deal as long as you just cook the meat really well.
Interesting. Yeah, in my previous home, I had beehives, and I'm gonna do it again. But that was talk about trial and error, like at the beginning of the show. I mean, I failed so many times, and this black bear kept climbing the tree, jumping the fence into the backyard, and he would just knock over sometimes one hive or sometimes both hives.
Yeah.
And I would look out my bathroom window and just see him going to town, and the bees are going crazy. They're flying at my flashlight coming out the window, and they're just pissed. And then I go out there the next morning, and they're just attacking me in the suit because they think I'm the bear, And but I walked out there with my flashlight, and this bear, he had to be like 500 pounds. He just turned and looked at me, and then just kept eating. It's like maybe like 30 feet away, and they're just majestic animals. Like there's something about the bear that's just they're so aware. There's something. I guess it's kind of close to a human, right? In a sense.
Sure. Yeah. Totally. Lot closer than say an elk or a deer. I think that's why there's more controversy over hunting them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you said small game. You've done, was it rabbits, squirrels, deer, elk? What else have you hunted?
Wild goats.
Wild goats
on Kauai. What else? Yeah, I think that's about it.
It's a pretty good amount. Yeah. I'll have to get into the small game. It's just because it's winter here. I haven't seen, coming from SoCal where there's squirrels year round. There's not many here. I guess it's too cold. They go underground or something.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I know squirrels do live in cold places, but I think you get far enough north and there's not that many of them. You might have rabbits around. Usually there's rabbits pretty much everywhere. And that's great for people to get into. Pretty much every location has rabbits somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably pretty easy to do a bow. I'd imagine you just have to get closer, and there's more of an element of being quiet as you're approaching the animal with the bow.
Yeah, definitely. There's less margin for error. So right, you got to be closer, you got to be quieter, and which is all really good for your skills as a hunter. It might be frustrating, but if you look at it in the right light, it's a good thing because you are learning. You're getting better at it. But yeah, it can be frustrating. That's why if people want to bow hunt, it's good to rifle hunt too. So, you can go out there and get some success. It's like anything, right? It's really important to have a few successful moments to keep you going, because, to keep going over and over and over again and not getting anything, it's tough.
Yeah, that's pretty taxing. And it seems like the advanced one is what do they call it? Fowl, right? Like flying, like people that hunt ducks or flying animals. I mean, because that's a moving target in the air. That's probably something to get into later, right?
Yeah. I'm going to do that this year, some duck hunting. And I've done some of the target shooting with a shotgun, where people have probably seen that. it's skeet shooting. So you have the little clay pigeons that get launched at a machine, or you can throw them by hand, and then you follow it with the shotgun and try to shoot a moving target, which is, yeah, it's challenging, but it's fun.
Yeah, that takes a lot of skill. I mean, even a non-moving target, I'm still practicing with the shotgun.
Yeah, totally.
I guess with that use, I mean, there's a whole thing with guns, like learning which ammo to use, right? Like generally in the air, you're using buckshot, right? The pellets that spray out.
Yeah, that's what a shot. So yeah, a shotgun shoots the pellets, and that's great for moving targets because you have a larger spread that you're hitting, right? So if you're trying to shoot a moving bird with a 22 rifle and you've only got one little tiny bullet and it's moving, it's just probably not going to happen. So when you shoot with a shotgun, those pellets can hit an area, much wider. So you have a lot more margin for error. And you can hunt rabbits and squirrels with shotguns too.
And the slug's more for like home defense.
Yeah. Well, as I say in the gun community, two-legged animals.
I love it. Super cool. Was there anything we didn't cover, Chris, that you wanted to talk about? I think that was pretty good. I really like your whole philosophy around hunting, and I like that you busted the myth about using all the animal, and there's all these conceptions that people have that really get busted when you experience it, right? It's usually for people that haven't, and I'm prone to that because I'm still ignorant with a lot of the hunting topics. But the more you dive in and actually just do it, like we were talking about, you learn through experience. Like, wow, a lot of these preconceptions I had were completely backwards, like 180.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm glad you got that, and that I had that experience too. And everybody does that. We have these ideas before we've done something that we often find are completely different in reality. And that's why it's important to do this stuff, because as something as important as food, which we all partake in, and if we eat meat, this is where it comes from, right? This is the real deal, and it's so important to at least experience that a little bit, just so you're a more sort of knowledgeable person and about what's really happening out there. It's really, really important.
I love it. Well, what do you have anything to promote, Chris? I'd love to to promote. I know it's so cool that you're giving, and you're just. I guess I can put in the show notes if you have any programs or anything coming up in the future. But
yeah, sure. I've done a lot of things over the years, but the way people can connect with us now, my partner Melissa and I have a company called Juniper Mist, which is junipermist.com. And it's an aromatherapy company. We make some really awesome smudging products. We make like a smudge spray and traditional burning sage, Palo Santo for cleansing energy. It's a great company. We've got awesome products. And we also do lots of free videos and that kind of stuff. And, it's a great place to connect with me and Melissa. And, if anybody has questions about everything we've talked about and hunting in particular, I love questions. I love helping people with it, especially because we both didn't come from a hunting background. We didn't grow up with it. When I got into it, I was in San Francisco. So the hunting population is probably like 0.01% or something. So it was just not around. And it was really hard to get into. So, I'm always happy to talk to people and help answer questions or get them started on the right path, because it has been so valuable for me and our family. I just like to share and help people with that process, because I know how challenging and kind of daunting it can be.
I love that. And you're on Facebook, right? Chris King on there.
Yeah, I got a Facebook account. I don't use it that much,
but in once a month.
yeah. There's probably a post from a year ago or something like that.
Awesome. And one thing I forgot to bring up is a chest freezer, and this took me years to learn. Like usually having even two, right? But at least one large chest freezer, and they're usually $200 to $300, right? That's a game changer for storing meat.
Oh yeah, it's essential, and just kind of a sort of prepping type thing as well. It's good to have just a little extra meat around. If something happens, just good to have a little more than what you picked up for that day at the grocery store, which is how a lot of us live, and I did for a while. But yeah, get a chest freezer, and you can get started by buying, say, a quarter cow. So if you want to stockpile some meat and have that experience, find a good source, a good ranch that's grass fed, and you can talk to the owners and what they're feeding the cows, and get yourself a quarter or an eighth of a cow. And that's a wonderful experience, just having extra meat around, right? Always being able to go out to the freezer and grab a steak or a roast, and that's a feeling of abundance for sure.
Yeah, I always just kind of have that like extra mindset of like having things on hand. Like I never just buy one carton of eggs. I buy like six at a time. And it just astounds me that people are like, okay, what am I going to eat next week? It's like, well, I kind of have like a month or two kind of planned out.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's how our grandparents lived, right? It's not like a new concept. It just sort of got forgotten the last generation.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, I need to get some more chickens. I had them at my last spot, and that's a whole nother thing, learning how to protect them from being eaten from like raccoons even and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think the best thing is a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Get you a guardian dog, and then the problems go away.
That makes sense. Well, awesome, Chris. Well, yeah, I'll put the links to how people can connect with you in the show notes and your Juniper Mist site. And thanks again for coming on. Stick around. I'm going to close out the show.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great.
Well, I hope that show was inspirational for you. I know it was for me. Every time I talk to someone that has experience with hunting and foraging and getting familiar with their ecosystem, learning the flora and fauna in their area, it just inspires me to do the same. And I really love what Chris said about finding someone with experience and going out in the field with them. That's the best way. And then maybe second best is getting a book of the local species in your area, because we all have different species because we all live in different areas, but there are some plants that are pretty ubiquitous. For example, nettle is one of those that's almost everywhere. Fireweed is another one that's almost everywhere. Birch trees are pretty widespread in the United States, except maybe the Midwest or certain areas. But there's tons of birch trees up here in the northern states. And with it comes birch polypore, chaga mushroom, all sorts of different species. And even the birch tree itself, there's so much you can do. And the resins, if you haven't heard my Dr. Cass Ingram interview where he talks about pine and spruce resin, and actually just watched a new YouTube video of Cass the other day talking about a lady that had severe rheumatoid arthritis that was reversed very quickly simply with spruce resin. So I think these tree medicines are very overlooked and underappreciated with what they can do, because they contain really powerful medicinal compounds. And it's incredible that we can gather these for free. I mean, you could support his company and purchase it, or you can go out in the forest and do it yourself, especially if you have pine cones. I've been out on hikes, and if you can find like those huge pine cones, like especially the size of your head, often you'll see resin caked on there, and you just peel that off, and then you can melt it and make your own little poultice, and infinite number of possibilities of what you can do with resin. So I hope you guys are enjoying my little experiential journeys. I share it with you here on the show. I'm not going to turn this into a hunting, foraging, rewilding channel, of course, because I like to share a wide variety, and I do like the quote unquote biohacking sort of stuff and the human optimization, but merging that with the old, which I think is really important, especially with water. That's kind of a complicated one. Every podcast under the sun, especially in the realm of biohacking and human optimization, they're pretty much all promoting spring water, which in my mind is poison for the most part. If you're traveling and you're camping and you're going to drink spring water for a few days, that's fine. But I wouldn't make sulfuric and nitric acid laden water my primary water. And some companies might claim, oh, there's none in the water. I haven't seen definitive proof of any water being acid rain free, because it's everywhere. The whole planet has a smoke ring around it. So that leads to acid rain around the whole planet. There's nowhere that's uncontaminated. There's nowhere to hide, essentially. And that's kind of like the black pill, red pill thing that we need to get. There's nowhere to escape to. So, as I mentioned in the interview, I think water filtration is another skill like hunting now. So, learning how to install water filters, how to change out water filters, how to even work with water filters and different filter media. This is as fundamental, we could say, as foraging and hunting to me. Because if you're not filtering even well water, even spring water, then you're getting fracking chemicals or acid rain chemicals, or likely a combination of the two. And not to mention nanoparticulates and whatever crazy stuff they're using with geoengineering, aerosol spraying in the skies. So life's definitely complex, but conversations like this, I like to keep it somewhat simple and foundational. Just eat more wild plants, eat more wild animals. And I'm still thinking about what Ben said about the aspirin-like compounds that are found in wild animals that aren't found in like your grass-fed beef, your domesticated meats anymore. So, and as Chris said in this talk, I think there's so many little details that we don't understand yet, we don't fully appreciate about wild consumption versus domesticated consumption. We're just scratching the surface of what we're missing when we live a domesticated lifestyle and we're only consuming agriculturally produced plants and farmed animals versus deer, elk, moose, bear, bison, all these wild genetics, not to mention them eating a wild diet, because that goes into the muscle meat. We eat the muscle meat and we gain all of those nutrients that we can't get direct from the plants. No matter what the vegans tell you, the purpose of ruminant animals is they have different digestive systems from a human. So the next time a vegan tells you that, look at a gorilla, well, a gorilla eats its own feces for one, or look at an elephant, or look at all of these strong, huge animals, and they're mostly on a, quote, plant-based diet, which is total psyop term. Their digestive system's totally different, and they have to eat constantly to make up for the poor nutrition in there. Whereas someone like a human being, which is a natural omnivore, can consume something like a muscle meat, which has concentrated essential amino acids in the right forms and ratios to support optimal human health and human development of, say, a fetus, of a growing baby, to have a fully functional brain. I really think that a lack of protein is a primary cause of stress, because the liver requires protein to detoxify polyunsaturated fatty acids, especially toxic omega-3s that accumulate in the liver and create lipofuscin and turn off the 500 functions in the liver, foremost of which is to convert inactive T4 thyroid hormone to active T3, which every cell in the body needs to generate energy and to heal. Can't do that if you're protein deficient. You can't do that if you're sugar deficient because you need glycogen there too. You have glycogen, you have animal protein, and you have animal saturated fat. And then maybe you take some PUFA Protect or some vitamin E on top of that. Now you have a winning combo, which takes years to detoxify all of that canola oil and sunflower and safflower, heated especially, that we were raised with, that was on our burritos, our tacos, our pizzas, our pastas, all the fake butter that we grew up with that was cut 50-50 with canola oil. Those little butter packets. You've eaten them. I've eaten them. We've all eaten them. Guess what? It doesn't just, you don't just poop it out. It gets in your fat. It gets in your adipose. And it gets stored for years. And then arguments that you have with your spouse or with anyone are amplified. Stress is amplified. Stress is caused and amplified by PUFAs. So I would really emphasize red meats over white meats like turkey and chicken, and eat more grass-fed beef. I really like bison. I like deer. And these red meats have a better nutrient profile than, say, chicken, which a lot of people are eating, like Chick-fil-A, is a big thing. And that combined with beer drinking is the case for man boobs, for men looking like they're pregnant, for basically the men turning into women. That's what beer plus Chick-fil-A causes. So the reverse of that is cutting out the alcohol and adding in red meat, because that will help with the hormones and that will actually decrease the estrogen. I would stack with that vitamin E. You combine those three, that's a male hormone balancing system that I'm personally using myself. So a little bit of a tangent there, but it all kind of relates. And I think it's really important for us to have an idea of what species are right outside our window. Even if you're in LA, even if you're in the city, you often have dandelion growing everywhere. And I wouldn't harvest it from the side of a freeway, but if you have a relatively covered backyard, or just getting some of that wild genetics in your body, those phytochemicals, those are important. And I wouldn't listen to the carnivore people. I fully disagree that plants are unnecessary. I think that we evolved eating some plants. Even if it was 5% of plants, we evolved eating 5% plants in our diet. I do believe in animal-based nutrition because it's impossible to survive on all plants. But just finding that balance, right? And that individual balance of what works for you with your bowel movements and the fiber. We don't make cellulase to digest cellulose, so excess cellulose can contribute to endotoxin formation, which can then contribute to every disease under the sun. And so there's all these connections to make, but it really is finding what ratio of animal to plant food works for you. I'm at probably a 90 to 95% animal nutrition, maybe 5% plants. And the plants that I do take are only in the form of plants that I forage myself, or Dr. Cowan's gardens, or Shen Blossom tinctures, or any of my medicinal mushroom powders that I take. It's pretty much all the plants that I consume, besides maybe potatoes and wild rice. And that works really well for me. I feel great on that program. So if you want to support what Chris and Melissa are doing, they have a company, Juniper Mist. You go to juniper-mist.com. I'll put the link below for that. And they have 3 smudge sprays. Even if you're not, like, I'm not really on the same page, I guess you could say spiritually, as that. I don't believe in smudging. But even for the bathroom, you could use it as just an air cleaner for your bathroom, just as a courtesy for the next person that goes in there. Just hopefully you're not on a vegan diet, because then it shouldn't smell that bad. And then if you want to support Melissa, she has a book, rawpaleo.com, and she has a whole skincare line, which is awesome, which is animal-based. So she has tallow scrubs you can use. made from animal fats, and animal saturated fat is excellent for the skin. So she has some really powerful products, especially for women there. And as always, if you want to support my work, you can go to matt-blackburn.com. That's all of my recommended products, which I update regularly. They all have discount codes. And I'm working on interviewing all of the different companies on there. I think I've interviewed most of them so far, so that you can kind of understand how and why I have the products on there. Really fun for me to do that. And then mitolife.co, that's my personal brand. So I have 3 enzyme products, a vitamin E product, and a Shilajit tablet product. And people are loving those. And it's kind of part of a protocol, but you can experiment with them. The Dissolve It All is by far the most popular, and people are using that to help with fibrosis and chronic inflammation and systemic issues. Because remember that scar tissue can be runaway. It could just go out of control. And with scar tissue, you have no oxygen getting to the tissue. And when no oxygen gets to the tissue, I don't care if it's the lung, the pancreas, the kidney, the liver, the thyroid, the adrenals, the gonads. If oxygen can't get to the tissues in those different organs, then those organs can't heal. And so that's why they're called systemic enzymes, is because these proteolytic Pac-Men go systemically throughout the entire body, eating away, dissolving all of the fibrin buildup. And then oxygen can get there, and then pathogens can get out, all the mold scare and all this stuff. I think the mold epidemic is caused by calcification, lipofuscin, and fibrosis. And you can quote me on that. I will put my reputation on the line to say that that is the cause of mold illness. It's foundational. I would say that's the cause of every illness. It's foundational. Calcification, lipofuscin, fibrosis. Calcification, lipofuscin, fibrosis. Those 3. Can't get oxygen to the tissue, you can't heal from X condition. Doesn't matter what name that you find for it. You have to get oxygen to the tissue to heal anything. So there's my little rant for the show. Hope you liked it. And as always, please share with your friends and subscribe, and really appreciate the continued support. It's a lot of fun for me to do this. It's a great creative outlet for me, and this is my journey. I'm just sharing it candidly and openly, and you're seeing my evolution in real time. So thanks for joining. Today's quote is by Arthur Haynes. Wage slavery is not your ultimate place in the world. You have genetic memory of awareness and self-reliance. To experience real sovereignty, you must undo the generations of forgetting that have occurred. Start the next generation's life free of institution. Have as natural a birth as possible. And continue to learn life skills that promote freedom, not from responsibility, but from oppression. Remember that ancestral lifeways, often referred to as primitive skills, are proven sustainable technologies. Learn these skills so you can experience freedom, further connection to nature, and link to your past.